All right, sculpture class. Happy Monday morning. I just posted into our Google Classroom starting paper mache information. So one, we're gonna have to make some sketches based on what you're planning on doing. Two, are you gonna make a creature or are you gonna make a headdress? And then three, what size you're going for. So size is going to be dependent on the materials you have at hand. You guys all have the paper mache box, but we don't need that right now, so we'll talk about that on Wednesday. First thing we want to do is we really want to start to think of what we're going to make, and I'm going to share a screen with you, and we're going to go from there. So sculpture, I just put this up. I'll add a link for our video today inside of it. And this is Gourmet Paper Mache. And the gentleman up here in the corner with the glowy dragon's head is Dan Reeder. Dan is a retired art teacher in California. And here are some of his works. He also likes cats. And Dan does these paper mache pieces. So everything you see here, it's a two-part process. He does paper mache and then he does cloth mache over the top of it. Some of his teeth are made out of polymer clay. Some of these little tips might be polymer clay. But overall, this is a paper mache creature. Everything here we can make out of paper mache except for the wooden plaque. And we could probably make that look like wood with some painting techniques. Some of these he's gotten into putting LEDs inside of so that they can light up, and they have light up kits. Some of the dragon heads that you're looking at right now, they go for $2,000 to $2,500. So there is a 5-headed dragon, and this is the finished look to it. So he started doing these probably early on in his career, and dragons kind of, he likes dragons, so he likes to do a lot of them. There are also people who send him pictures of their paper maches, and he'll post them on his website. So different little things going on. And you can see he has, it looks like 38 pages of just people who have put up and done his paper mache. When we are looking at, he has several books out, he has some videos, and I've got a link to those here in a second. But you can see he's made hundreds of paper mache projects. He was a math teacher, and he used to do this in his 6th grade math class. And there's a lot of kind of interesting things. Some of his stuff he does as art for political reason. Some of it is commission work. A lot of it is stuff that he makes and then he puts up for sale. When he finishes his, he'll coat them so that, depending on where it's going to be displayed, but things that are outside are going to have a heavier coat to them. They're probably going to have a resin or an epoxy that's poured over to seal the outside, or a sealant put on top of them so that it doesn't degrade over time. I think this is one of the ones I think is really interesting to look at, and this was the inspiration for one of our seniors a couple years ago who did a 2-headed snake. So this little ridge is just created during the cloth mache phase. So what you're looking at right now is this has been paper mache. There's a couple of coat hangers that run through here. You could leave the coat hangers on the outside edge, but this was done during the cloth mache stage as the strips of cloth were put on, and it's just scrap cloth, like scrap t-shirts, any scrap rag cloth, dipped in a mixture of Elmer's glue broken down by a little bit of water, and then he just scrunches the center to make that nice little ridge to come through. And then on the top, he cuts out a whole bunch of scales. And the effect of the scales looks really nice as it kind of blends out. And you get that nice ridge down the middle that follows through. All of these little spiky pieces and the teeth are all made of polymer clay. The tongue is paper mache, and then he uses a glass eyeball to actually add in for the eyes. So that's a real glass piece in there. So they're like half circles with eye patterns onto them. You can see how on the head he's got a different little scale pattern, and then he starts the scales and slowly works his way down. He keeps pretty consistent size scales. He starts to reduce them as he gets smaller in the tail, but all the tail parts that are the same size, he keeps the scales the same. And all these nice details really lend it to make it into something realistic. So last week we talked about how paper mache traditionally is viewed, and we're going to make something that looks cool, something that looks sculptural, artistically made. So if you go to his YouTube page, it is Gourmet Paper Mache. I've got a link in there. And he has all kinds of videos, but these aren't how-to videos. These are just really quick how things are put together. We'll watch one here in a second. But some of the nice things is when you look through is he'll have videos on not only just paper mache, but he also has some videos on some of his like puppeteering pieces that he's made. I think there might be one on making a mask, but most of them are going to be about making the paper mache itself. So we're going to go over here and scroll. Again, lots of dragons. And we're going to watch the Naga one. It's only 3 minutes, so we're going to watch it as a group here. So coat hangers. To me, he uses a lot of masking tape. I don't use that much masking tape. To me, the masking tape has a coating on it, and it resists the paper. He uses a flour mix and newspaper. Again, I'm going to warn you guys about using flour because the flour mixture will cause problems in the fact that it can draw bugs or critters because flour paste is edible. So if you're going to use flour, make sure you store it and you're careful on where you put it. Don't leave it on the ground. Don't leave it in a space where natural bugs would come. He does some pre-painting as he works. Pre-painting to get into especially areas that are going to be tight later on. Hot glue, and you can see that eyeball put in. Again, that's a lot of masking tape. And I find that much masking tape sometimes will cause our paper mache to not stick. There's a wax coating on paper mache, and that wax coating will resist it. That's a cloth mache he's adding right now. The cloth mache is Elmer's glue and water to break down the Elmer so it's not so thick, and it cuts down its viscosity, so then when you dip the cloth into it, you can absorb it and then just go ahead and put it on. And here you can see him making that ridge. So the ridge doesn't exist. It's just him pushing it together with his fingers from the two sides, and that's how the entire ridge is made. When the cloth mache dries, it dries super hard. It's something that will take your paper mache from something that's gonna last for a year or two, something that can last 5 or 10 years, something that can take a bit of damage to it. And then you see him, all of the little scales are added on during the cloth mache phase. And we don't have to do cloth mache, but the reason he can get away with so much masking tape is you can see him putting directly over that masking tape. He's putting the cloth right over the top of it. That helps because it's Elmer's glue, not paper mache mix, and it has a little bit more ability to stick to the masking tape. Here, he's just kind of doing his paint level. I don't know if we'll actually get to paint level just because I'm not going to require it because not all of you have paint. He's using acrylic-based paint, so he paints right over the glass eyeball with the acrylic paint. And in a second here, it'll show him peeling it off. So you're just careful not to scratch up the glass, but he's using a craft knife, and he's just carefully going through and cleaning off all those paint spots. And the eyeball really makes it look realistic, and then that's his finished little guy there. So what we are doing, if we were in the classroom, we usually take about 3 weeks to do the whole process from beginning to end. Since you're working at home, you're working at your pace, I figure this is going to take us through probably the next 3 to 4 weeks to do. If we were in the classroom, our square size would be between 8 and 16 inches cubic. So I would probably say right now, I probably try to keep it around 12 cubic inches. 12 cubic inches is about 3 thick sets of newspaper. So it's going to take you about 3 inches of folded newspaper, normal newspaper just folded over to complete this whole task. I would think that one of the things is size matters in the fact that every time you put down paper mache, you have to let it dry for a day. So when I'm working with paper mache, now that doesn't mean I put on 1 layer and I set it down to dry. It means that I'm going to put on 2, 3 layers at a time, and I put down a layer. I do hand in goo, smear the goo, put the paper over the top of it, and do my next layer. I want to have about 5 layers of thickness to make a good shell. We're doing a laminating process. The laminating meaning that every layer is going to stack on top, and the glue binds those layers together. And we're not really adding force to press them, but when we put them on and we push them in place, and that's going to be enough to bind those layers to each other. It will make a nice thick shell to get this to a point where it's going to be solid and able to hold up. Things we're going to do is we're going to hollow out a lot of the body and the head if we're making a creature to lighten it up. Appendages are going to become solid. They stay solid to help kind of push things up. Now, if I have arms dangling above, I'm going to try to lighten those arms as much as I can. I'm going to use coat hangers to become a armature, an internal frame, the skeleton of your piece. And I would just use, don't get really thick coat hangers. We're talking like when you go to the dry cleaners, the thin metal coat hangers, easily take apart and bend. Dan uses a bunch of things there, and he's getting $2,000 a sculpture, so he can afford to clip the ends off. I don't. I bend out the ends and I use them. So 2 main ways to approach the project. Way 1, come up with some sort of creature, monster, whatever you want to make. Do some sketches. Think simple forms. So like spherical bodies or square bodies. And think how many appendages you're going to have. Think of what it's going to be doing. So those are your pre-sketch work. You can also use inside the body. So if you don't have a bunch of newspaper to make big newspaper balls that you're going to paper mache over, you can use a balloon, and you can inflate a balloon and you can use that to become parts of it. You can use cardboard. You can cut up some cardboard and use that as internal supports. Remember, the shell is the thing that's going to take most of the weight. And we have to think of weight distribution from our creature to its base or where it sits. Your creature should be stable when it's done. It should be in the round so we can see it from all sides, except for where it makes contact. And it should be freestanding. You shouldn't have to help it. It should be able to stay on its own. If you're going to do a headdress should either sit on top of head or cover head like a helmet. So then you're going to have to make something that's big enough for your head to fit into. You're going to need ways to see out of it and ways to breathe. And you want to think about things like, how does it, how is it being creative? How are you making a unique thing? So a Batman mask, not so unique. All by itself, it's just a little bit here and maybe the back and little bat ears. That's not going to take you 3 weeks to do that. It'll take you maybe 1 week to do. But then you can think of things to add on to it. So I had 2 students, one make a knight helmet, a shield, and a sword. And the other one made a Viking head, including a Viking beard. And then he made a round shield and an axe. So they worked together They came up with the concepts that one was going to be a Viking and one was going to be a knight. And then they helped each other build and put things together. They helped each other paper mache and cloth mache and make all their parts. And then because they did combine, I gave them a boost in their grade because they collaborated with each other and came out with a cool design. So your idea is to create something that you're going to like. And we are definitely going through all the way. So normally in 3 weeks, we go through design phase, build phase, seal phase with gesso and then paint. And then paint usually takes us a couple of days. So it's usually a 3-week to 3.5-week project. So we're not going to paint them because there's no way for me to get you guys paint or gesso without a logistic nightmare. So we are going 3 weeks on the build only. So that means I'm looking for something really interesting in build. You only have to paper mache. If you want to also do cloth, you're going to need Elmer's glue. We'll talk about that a little bit. I have one of the Dan Reeder books, and I'll see if there's a way I can get some pictures of it because it has some nice little steps inside of it, and we might review that a little bit on Wednesday. But between now and Wednesday, what I want you guys to do is do those 3 main things on the Google Classroom and really kind of figure out what you're going to make. I will caution you, making people is tough because people have 4 fingers. Most of the monsters he does only has 3 fingers and a thumb. Making people, because having them stand or sit, sitting is easier, but standing figures are tough because trying to balance it on 2 legs is hard to do. We want to make sure that our proportions would be proper. In making a person, sometimes a proportion is tough. It's not impossible. I've had several students make really cool people. There was a really nice ballerina not too long ago, and then one person, it's in the back of the classroom, has a really tall, it was an advanced student, made a really tall kind of wizard holding a staff. So it is possible. It's just it's a little bit tougher because you have to really concentrate on what you're going to do. As of today, I do not have the do not assign new projects date yet. So eventually, high school administration and district administration are going to come up with an idea that on this day in May, it'll be the last day for us to start anything new. And then students will have 5 days or 7 days after that date to get all their work turned in to grade. There are no exams, so no exams for the class. And then we're going to do a portfolio, and the portfolio is going to be just all the pictures you've been taking of your projects put together in a Google slide, and we're going to pop that in. So that's what I have for you guys today. Questions?
So if I go to Joanne Fabrics, are they going to have the fabric that I need to do cloth crochet or whatever it's called?
I wouldn't go to Joann's because you don't need to buy brand new fabric. That's a great question. I would go to on Friday, supposedly everything's going to open up. You can go to like a thrift store, and I would buy an old bed sheet. And just get like you don't want to get a really heavy cloth. Like I have, and I'm working with someone had brought in a flannel t-shirt and they got really frustrated with it. But the flannel is really heavy, so it absorbs the glue it absorbs the glue a lot, and then it makes it kind of hard to manipulate because it's so thick. Something like, so this is old t-shirt material, and it's one of my painting cloths that I have, and it's thin, it's stretchy, it's probably mostly cotton blend, but it's an old cut up t-shirt, and I would use things like that. So old t-shirts. So if you've got a bunch of old t-shirts that you were thinking, man, I don't need these anymore, I don't wear them anymore, cut them up. Look for scrap cloth first before I don't want you guys to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. And then you just need any white glue, like Elmer's is, a name brand, but you don't need Elmer's because you're going to take the glue, and it's about 2 to 3 parts glue to about 1 part water, so that you mix. And I would mix it in small batches. The glue, if you cover it to use over a time period, I would not try to let the glue sit more than 4 days. At 4 days, glue will start to get a smell to it. And then at 5 days, depending on where it sits, not only is it going to be dried out and start to crust a little bit, but it could also start to turn. It might get moldy. We found
Okay.
glue hidden, so it gets a little icky. If you do cloth mache, so you see in his video, he skips paper mache to do cloth mache in some areas. The cloth is going to give you some bonuses in the fact that it is stronger. So the cloth itself, being a fibrous weave, is stronger than paper by nature. So I can't just usually tear cloth that wants to stretch and bend. Whereas newspaper, I would just and tear it. I don't need as many coats if I do cloth. You can use the cloth with the paper mache mix. So you don't have to use Elmer's glue. The difference going to be is this will still absorb the mache mix and it will still go on. It's just not going to be as strong as it was with Elmer's glue. I've never tried to mix Elmer's glue with paper mache mix. You could try it and see what happens, but I would make a little test, you know, add a little bit and try to give yourself a measurement just to test it first. But cloth is going to give you the ability to, if you crinkle cloth, it's going to make little crease patterns and those will stay. You can do the same thing with the newspaper, but because the newspaper is thin, when you go to crinkle it sometimes, the crinkles won't be as pronounced, because this, even if it traps a little bit of air, is going to hold that, whereas the newspaper is going to want to smush and flatten itself back down.
All right. So where would one get a wire hanger? Because I don't really have any, actually.
So do you know anybody who goes to get dry cleaning?
No.
Oh, that's where I get all mine. So not that I get dry cleaning, like Miss Kiefer supplies me with a bunch. There's a bunch of people on staff. I always put in an email, hey, I'm collecting newspapers and I'm collecting coat hangers. So that's where I normally get them. If you don't have coat hangers, so my next line of, it depends on your design if you need a coat hanger. So like I'll bring in, on Wednesday, I'm going to bring in the spider that I'm making, and you're going to see why I have coat hangers, because I have those thin legs that hold up the body. And even though the body is mostly hollow, it still has some weight to it. So the coat hanger helps support it. But if I'm not doing a lot of support, like if I was just making a torso piece, I could use cardboard in place. If I have thin arms, so if I were making a horse, I could make the body pill shape and then hollow that out. So it's going to lighten up. And then I could actually make the legs of the horse out of pieces of cardboard, and take a couple pieces of cardboard and put them together and then paper mache that cardboard. Because cardboard is paper based, oversaturation can cause the cardboard to warp. So you want to make sure that you're careful when you lay it down. I would not try to have my horse's legs down and paper mache that, so that while the body's on it, I would paper mache all the legs individually and then add them together, because that much weight could cause the cardboard to buckle or dry, and then you'd have like a bow-legged creature and you might be upset.
So I do have wire that's used for jewelry making. Would that work?
It's probably, if it's jewelry making, it's probably going to be like 16 gauge or 16 to 20 gauge. I lied. It's probably going to be 16 gauge or less wire. It might work a little bit, but that's expensive wire. If you have any old electrical lines, so I did copper trees. Let me see. I did copper trees with students. Hang on, let me go grab some. So this is old electrical wire. And for this, you don't even need to undo the plastic coating. And I could use that, and that's definitely gonna hold. It's a little springy. If I open it up, inside is small pieces of copper. And at this gauge, I don't know if it's gonna actually give you so much armature support. If it's twisted together, that would help. And then Advance made some copper trees not too long ago. So, so some of this is computer wire, some of it's phone wire, some of it's old electrical wire. Don't dig into the walls of where you live, but basically that's where it came from, was old scrap from electrical work done around the school. That could help. Really, you only need the armature if you have something that's going to hold up a lot of weight, or if you're trying to make something that's going to kind of dangle, or something that's going to be far out. If it's thick enough that you can put cut strips of cardboard, that'll work just as well. Smooth a little Elmer's glue between layers of cardboard and sandwich them together. Any other questions while we're here? Just looked up and was happy that I saw that I am recording. I forgot that I forgot I hit yes on that button.
So this project's gonna take us all the way to the end of the school year?
This will probably take all the way to the end. I figure the goal is to make something around 12 inches. Some of you guys will go a little bit bigger. So like if I'm doing a snake, the length of the snake from head to tail might be longer, but if it's twisted around, it's going to fit into the space. That would be a reason you might need hangers, is if you were going to make it long and then you were going to bend it, and you would need the hanger to hold it in place. Hangers can go inside or outside structure, just depends on your design. But I figure working on our own, even though we're not going to paint them and finish them, which if you have the supplies, some of you might have supplies for it. I would use an acrylic-based paint. Dan uses a lot of, he goes to hardware stores and finds oops paints. The oops paints are getting kind of expensive now. But he uses, you know, leftover, whatever people didn't like paints. If you want to, but I'm not requiring it. I figure just the build process to go from concept sketches, this week concept sketches, and some of you will be ready to start building this week, to finished all together paper mache will take us till the end. All right, if you guys don't have any questions, then you can bounce for today. Concept sketches, I'd like stuff by Wednesday. I'll put the assignment, and it'll be concept sketches for paper mache inside of Google Classroom. And then would you guys, if I can find some, I don't know if I have too many concept sketches. If I have concept sketches from students, would you guys like to see those? Or would you like to see some student work in there? Or are you just happy going on your own?
I think I'm cool going on my own.
Okay. Cole, did you have something?
Actually, I did. I said I could use visuals. I'm like her. I could use some help. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll look for some and pop some in. And now get out my pad to help me remember. All right, guys.